Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Safe Spaces, Real Insights, Exploring Sensitive Subjects through itracks Board. My name is Crystal. I'm the marketing manager here at itracks, and I've got just a couple of housekeeping items to go over before I introduce you to our presenters for today. So first, the recording will be sent out to everyone who registered for the webinar. That'll come to you via email later this week. Second, we have planned to leave some time at the end of today's webinar to answer questions. So please feel free to ask questions as you go along. You can do so in the Q&A section of your Zoom panel here. So it is different from the chat box. It's a special section that says Q&A. So just write your questions in there as you think of them, and I'll be happy either to respond back via that Q&A panel or to have Carey and Dan answer them for you at the end. Going to introduce to you our presenters now. We've got two today, the first being Carey Crantford. Carey is the owner and chief focus group moderator at Crantford Research based in Columbia, South Carolina. He has spent over 30 years conducting focus groups for criminal and high-stakes civil court cases. He's a member of the Qualitative Research Consultants Association and the American Trial Consultants Association, and a former editor of the QRCA's member publication. He's an expert at moderating and organizing online and in-person discussion panels, and continues to do special survey research projects for public affairs and hospital clients. He's here today to share with you a very interesting product that he led, focused on fentanyl use and awareness in teenagers, and the innovative ways he was able to glean a lot of openness, honesty, and real insight. And it was actually our second presenter, Dan, who originally heard about this project and came up with a wonderful idea to share it with our webinar audience. So many of you are already familiar with Dan Weber, co-founder and president of itracks. He's a graduate of the University of Saskatchewan and a true pioneer of online qualitative research, having co-founded itracks back in 1996. And his passion is bringing value to clients throughout innovation. So without further ado, let's get started, and we will start with you, Carey.
Appreciate the introduction, and just let me just shout out to Dan and Crystal, who's made this entire process, very, very easy. I was excited in talking to Dan about the kind of approach we took from a design and actual research approach with a unique project. And he thought it might be worth sharing with lots of folks. And so I appreciate the invitation to do so. Let me give you a little bit of background about who we are and what we do. And then we'll kind of talk about the problem that we faced with a particular project and some background on that particular problem as a focus group moderator. Kind of list out how we went about solving that, utilizing the itracks board tool, which provided us a whole lot of unique dimensions into the problem that we were looking into, and then kind of sum it up with kind of what we learned on this journey. Now, the good thing about it was, as soon as we finished this project, we were engaged to do another. So if the proof is in the pudding with the client in terms of liking what you're delivering through insights, and that you're given another opportunity to use the same methodology in order to bring new, the same level of insights into it. So let me, we're located in Columbia, South Carolina, and we're a boutique shop. We've done everything for 30 years, from have our own phone bank to concentrate on quantitative analysis. But it really, in the last 10 or 15 years, we have tended to focus more on our qualitative research. We have clients scattered about the Southeast. We're pretty regional in our approach with things, and they run the gamut from a very large Indian tribe in dealing with all of their hospitality projects, to a rather robust practice in the field of jury selection and litigation planning. And along the way, we do an awful lot of just regular, traditional focus group work for advertising firms, clients with products, a lot of just kind of traditional one-offs with it. But one of the things that we've, which is kind of our focus today, and let me just introduce the subject here succinctly, are difficult subjects. Frequently focus groups, particularly when you're dealing with the breadth of clients that we are, somewhere along the line, you're going to get a really difficult subject in order to try to engage your focus group participants on. The presence of that subject, sometimes it's known and other times it's unknown in a group, but being able to try to plan for that and develop methods both of questioning and inquiry, where anonymity sometimes, or being safe with information, or being comfortable with discussing types of very difficult subjects is really critical. The client wants results, so it's up to us to try to figure out how to take these difficult subjects and cordon them off and make our approach in the focus group as a moderator useful for bringing these things to light. Focus groups are kind of a stage, a presentation, if you would. The moderator is really the director and the actor of everything that's going on right there on the stage. The moderator is in control of this, and we're looking at a very small audience in order to, one, give a story, or give information, and try to get feedback with it. That's the objective, of course, is to hear them discuss the topics and learn from them and build insights about what their motivation is as they deal with various decision-making points. The getting an audience to open up and reveal what's on the inside is really the key. Lots of tricks to doing that as a moderator, and your success as a moderator is really measured on your ability to do that. However, the monkey wrench in projects like this, or any project for the most part, and we're going to look at a kind of a benign one and an extreme one, is the presence of some factor related to what you're doing that could stall out the focus group completely, causing people either to shut down, disagree, or create a lot of problems. And in today's political environment, that certainly is part of what it is. But we still have to deliver. So trying to figure out some strategy to mitigate these problems that are in the focus group, again, some known, some not, is a real key skill for the moderator these days. Validity, that's what it all comes down to. If you can't get the information in a valid method, if you can't cordon off bias, if you can't control for that extraneous thing that may enter into the conversation, if you can't engage people in a safe manner on a difficult topic, then the validity of what you're learning is highly questionable. It's confounding, much more confounding when the focus groups are considering inflammatory or shocking or even uncomfortable topics. And in these groups, the subject matter in and of itself is often the threat to validity. So you've got a double-edged sword when you're dealing with something that's just not, which cell phone company do you like, which hamburger do you like to go to, what these things, these focus groups that contain kind of very, very difficult information. We've been dealing with it for at least 20 years, and it started really kind of with a group that happened a number of years ago in the legal, and this is kind of the unintended one. The topic in the focus group was about a car accident, and a 50-year-old well-heeled businessman had been rear-ended in a traffic collision. The rear end hurt his back, and as a result, he could no longer play golf, tennis, do an awful lot of active things with it. And so it was clear, liability was clear in it, but the attorneys wanted to know kind of what the damage profile might be if it was presented to a jury. And they had a particular question in this project, and that was to test the idea of loss of consortium. loss of consortium is a legal term, and a variety of people, I'm sure a lot of people know what it means. Most people take it as having to do with the intimacy of the relationship between the husband and wife, but it has a few more meanings as well. But what happens in these types of cases, even though the husband was damaged or hurt, and that's where the true liability was, the wife had the ability to file a claim because she was saying she loss of consortium as her damage as a result of this. So they wanted to test whether or not that is something that a jury would warm to. So we brought it up right there, sensitive subject, but not something unusual to talk about among adults. But the boomerang was really kind of an interesting lesson in terms of how to go about thinking about sensitive topics. I introduced it. In fact, we'll look at this as part of the problems of doing this. Here I am, male, at that time, I'm 50 something years old. Majority of the group is female because that was what the recruit required. I brought it up saying I'd like to talk to you about this, which is a claim the law allows, loss of consortium. And everybody kind of looked at me with a little bit of a blank stare. And a woman said, wait a minute, you're talking about sex, aren't you? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, that is an aspect of what the legal definition of a loss of consortium is, but you've pretty much gotten to the core of it, which is essentially the wife is saying because of the accident, the injury to her husband's back, that there is, that she is suffering loss in the legal terms, loss of consortium. The lady who questioned it all of a sudden started laughing. And then a lady across the table started laughing. And then another lady started laughing. And I'm a little mystified about what the laughing is meaning. Finally, a lady said, look, that wife doesn't care about this. He probably wasn't good at it anyway. She's more than likely satisfied to not have to deal with that. But if he couldn't cut the grass, or if he couldn't fix the car or take out the garbage, then that's a real loss. Well, that was it. That was the end of the discussion of loss of consortium. A lot of things happened with that exchange, but there was something taking a sensitive topic and actually turning it into a much broader narrative that reflected an awful lot of what this particular woman felt. But because of the way she said it and how she said it, every other woman in the group was going to basically, and did, kind of line up behind her, saying the loss of consortium was not a valid claim here. And men became a little bit irritated because all of a sudden their prowess had been generally rejected. So that right there, difficult talk. Now a more overt one, which is really in the death penalty cases that we've dealt with. And here's where the term that we've used in trying to labeling these types of focus groups called shock and awe. In death penalty cases, obviously there's some gruesome loss of life involved in it. And in order to defend them, you certainly have to go through the facts of the case. And an awful lot of what a prosecutor is involved in is trying to not necessarily aggrandize them, but maybe that's not a bad word, of what happened in the case. So as a focus group moderator, when you're testing strategies to try to argue against it, you're having to put on the table automatically the facts of a gruesome case, and then try to start a discussion after you've talked about it. In this particular instance, a kind of a drifter in a community who was going around trying to get jobs in people's yards, raking leaves. An older woman kind of rejected his advances about it. He gets angry, comes back, breaks into her house, kills her by decapitating her. After that, he decides to burn her house down, which he sets the house on fire. And the neighbor next door, also an elderly woman, sees this, the fire, comes over, comes in the front door. The guy is still there. he kills her as well. The fire department is called, and the responding chief on the fire engine walks in only to find that that is his mother, who's been a part of this. Now, there's probably no more set of gruesome circumstances to present to this, and going into the focus group, you could see this is not the subtle one like the loss of consortium, but that this entire case depended upon how people reacted to the facts, the horrid facts of this case, and how they could, if at all, fight through them in order to find some sort of understanding about the issue of guilt or innocence or death penalty or life in prison. And it is at that point that we really began some years ago trying to systematically figure out how to go about eliminating these and coming up with a more useful approach that would help us. The project issues in anything, hold on. Let's see. Yeah, resume. There we go. So the specific threats, either subtly or in the complex one. One, they begin with the moderator. The loss of consortium, the fact that I was a male sitting there and talking about this was a factor in how people were reacting to it. So who the moderator is, their skills, all that is a part of it. The demographics of that, the building of trust begins with that, who you are and how you're working with it. And that one, it was an important. The other is selection, who's in the room and what's their history. Mitigating, these difficult problems is a recruitment strategy as well. And one of the things that we realized in the selection and the selection history in terms of the individual connecting to the topic and having a problem with it, is to do better screening and don't let the topics be a surprise. Go ahead during the recruiting process and let people know what it is you're doing. You don't have to go into the specifics, but go ahead and eliminate the people that have a great deal of sensitivities. The one that's the hardest is the interaction, as the one with the loss of consortium. And then in the one in the death penalty, there's always an incredible amount of interaction once these topics get in. And by interaction, it means people telling stories about things and also dipping back in their own history on topics such as this, and then beginning to relate to this, the whole thing of social acceptance. Then you get problems of behavior, acting out, people turning off, people going, just not engaging with it. Now, a lot of that can be solved by the middle point, the selection and selection history things, but these are real problems. And even in the loss of consortium, the whole social interaction part of it, our acceptance and interaction, the acting out became part of the focus group, which became part of the problem with going forward. Now, we come to the itracks bulletin board and all of this. We were asked to take on a project. Hey, can you get a bunch of teenagers together in a room and ask them about what they think about fentanyl and drug use? We are preparing some PSA advertising, and we want to have the insights of what teenagers say about this problem. Wow, well, interesting and important topic, but one based on our experience, and obviously you can click it off yourselves, particularly if you've done any youth moderating, what the threats to validity are with a situation like that. Fentanyl, killing people, drug use, who wants to admit to it, even knowing about it, who wants to discuss it? How do I look socially if I'm willing to discuss that? The whole interaction with it. The fact that it was teenagers, what are we going to do about those that are under 16? Because the law says there has to be a parental consent. The whole thing of personal information entering into the discussion, which could be medical. all of a sudden brings up a whole lot of host of other issues. But the research topic was valid. And me, am I going to moderate 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds in a group setting with their parents sitting outside and think that I'm going to get a basket of good insights in that? I've had 3 kids, raised 3 kids, kind of understand some of those things, but still no adult is going to be able to solicit that emotional information and interest or knowledge about these things and get it done. So I told the client, I said, look, we need to rethink this thing. Just about the time that I began experimenting with the itracks board tool, and it all of a sudden, provided the unique solution to bringing key insights to the table by doing a few very, very important things. One, protecting the anonymity of who was involved in it. Let me just go through the process so you can see about all the different things that it did for us. Okay. The threats to validity started at the beginning. I'm not going to put teenagers in a room and ask them something. One, they're sitting across from each other, the cool girls looking at the cool guy, and all of a sudden, people aren't treating this thing as serious. Plus, you're doing an adult to kid conversation. And even if you bring in a younger moderator, the access or the setting of it doesn't really allow for a lot of individual sharing for it. The age of the respondents was also a unique problem. 16 is age of consent. I can contact the 16-year-old and ask them to do a lot of things. But the issue here was 13, 14, 15, and above. That required parental consent. So getting the permission of parents, number 3, was critical in order to accessing students. How do you go about recruiting these? Well, our idea was to recruit the parents first. And through a series of outreach things, we asked parents who were interested in parenting issues involving teens, very, very simple, very benign, to sign up. And then once we had them, again, back to our familiarity with difficult topics, we were able to explain to them what we were doing and give them the option of allowing us to include a student in a survey, which also the parent would take. Now, that was an important key in order to build acceptance for the student, because what parent is going to say, sure, you want to talk to my child about drugs and ask them about them? What are you going to ask them? So that was a big barrier breaker, is to, one, involve the parents in the selection and the permission process, regardless of the age of the student. Then we realized that what we had done is something that was actually going to benefit from the project significantly and can significantly benefit any other project. We now had 2 waves of the same questionnaire. By involving the parents and asking them to interact with the questionnaire to see it so that they would approve it, allowed us to glean information about the knowledge of drug use, how much they talk to their kids, what's out there, what are they using, special names or topics as well. The same questionnaire with a couple of small changes was administered to the parents, that was also administered to the teens. But they were done in separate sessions. The itracks board allows for the scheduling of these. So that made it very, very easy to organize a group of parents and organize a group of teens that were going to get the questionnaire at different times. The parents got it first. They were told in the instructions not to discuss it with their teens. The teens got it second. Both groups had 2 days to work it. Again, giving them time to assess and think and understand. And for particular, it gave teens the option of doing it at midnight, using their phone, using any means that they communicate, comfortably with in order to access the question and answer them on their own time. The other was the inflammatory nature of the topic. Well, without a moderator, it was a bulletin board. People, and by having the understanding that your answers were anonymous, that inflammatory nature of the topic, drug use, and a couple of instructions that we said we didn't want anyone identified, your school or anything like that, allowed for a rather free flowing of information on the topics of awareness, use, things that are out there, how people are getting, even into where things are popping up on social media. Legal issues with the consent one was the other, but also there's a whole area in this problem about Snapchat or various other social media platforms kind of being the marketplace for teen drug use. We didn't want to bring that up and build it into a question because that would have somewhat dealt with us. There may be a liability issue in it. However, if the students brought it up or the parents brought it up, then we were able to explore that. So that helped overcome some legal problems that we had to worry about. Out of bounds discussion or interaction. The interesting thing about this, we kind of expected it, and we got a little bit of wordiness and a lot of, a little youth culture and some of that stuff. However, being able to go back and ask the question again, to reconnect with them, helped straighten some of that out. And I can't overemphasize the fact that this is coming from the project manager, a name, not a face, not a white male sitting there asking you questions about, who is vaping in the bathroom and all these things. So you were able to distance from a lot of this. And because we put it on the non-influence mode, which I'm sure Dan will talk about that, the kids were not seeing the answer of other kids. So they weren't seeing what the cool kid over here was saying and then parroting their answer. The other was the anonymity of it. There's a variety of ways to sign people up on this. You can assign them, they can assign themselves. And although I could track who was what, I could, for the client, that information was not available. So we were able to report rather deeply with information from the survey back to the client using the words of the student and the parent. The meaning of it, huge. Here we have a transcript of parents, here we have transcripts of students. We know their age, we know what they were exemplars of everything. The huge issue was what parents were thinking and saying they were doing, what kids were self-reporting about things that were going on, were vastly different things. So the insight, which is not revolutionary in terms of this topic, is there's a gulf of understanding among these two groups, which the creatives then need to worry about solving with it. So all the way around, as I started off and said, the success of this was so good that they ordered another round of it. We also did it statewide. So we were not a focus group on this at home, live, one community. Here we were able to target rural. We were able to make sure our diversity was good with it, as well as our age group spread. So we talked to not just suburban families across South Carolina. It was a mix of people, and it was a great way to assemble that group and have them, participate and be a part of it. All in all, the tool helped do a lot of the things that we try to do in terms of our online or even live focus groups, in terms of recruiting, walling off things, making sure we have things introduced properly and correctly. But more importantly here, it helped us do it with a very, very unique audience and provide us really kind of with a template for thinking about how to introduce in the future difficult subject matter, even in the court cases, in order before we get to the focus group platform, so that we have brought people along on these, desensitize them to a certain point, and allow them to be more productive in terms of the focus group, or opt out, So this highly useful, highly valuable in terms of what we did. Last thing, and I think it kind of permeates this entire process, as well as everything that everybody's been dealing with for the past few years, finding new tools, looking at new tools, trying to move to the next level, as well as overcome the restrictions that we all faced when all of a sudden our live practices kind of went awry. I thought about all this and actually thought about my grandfather. That's kind of the end here, who was a master mechanic for the Southern Railroad. He used to take me every now and then down to the yard. Can't imagine this ever happening now. Climbing on diesel engines and just kind of, flabbergasted at the massiveness of these things and the fact that my grandfather worked on these. This is what he did. He could take them apart and put them back together again. And I was so, I remember to this day, it's kind of a philosophy of life, and it fits in here. And I said, how do you know how to do it? How do you do this? And his thing was, you got to have a great toolbox. And in a way that fits here. No matter how complex the problem, having a great toolbox can help ease into that and figure it out. And that's one of the things that the bulletin board meant to us, as well as the support, the easy onboarding, the double transcript, all of the things that were there, part of it, provided for not only a quality end product, but gave us a strategy. The tool gave us a strategy for meeting this, and it'll become a long-term choice for us as we move out in all the other projects that we have in front of us. So that's that in a nutshell. Happy to take questions or move on to what Dan's got to talk to.
Well, thank you very much, Carey. Very, very intriguing. It's the reason why I wanted to bring you on here, because I think that story needs to be told. It's something that I emulated with me right away, because I see some of the work that's being done in the tool, and that's certainly one amazing example of how it was being used. So thank you again. What we'll do next is maybe I'll just, one of the asks was that I just do a really brief overview of the tool itself and some of the features that are accessible to you and so on. And then we'll move into the Q&A section of it. And then Crystal can kind of parse out the questions that are related to the tools and so on, and then to the research. So yes, thank you very much. Let me just share my screen. And Carey, if you just nod, if you can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, again, I'm just going to run you through a really quick overview of what Carey used. This is an AI discussion group that we did. It's the bulletin board discussion group. I'm going to show you this from the researcher perspective, so it's going to have a bit of more bells and whistles and so on than what a participant might see, just because yeah, I wanted to give you a sense of what it might be from looking from your perspective. Obviously the product is used in many different ways. Groups of sensitive topics and anonymity, like it is indeed a method of choice. Other areas where we see the product being used, hard to find audiences, professionals, any cases where it's going to be a very difficult task to get them all into the room at the same time. We do a lot of work in the medical profession, specialist surgeons, those types of things. In other cases, your audience may span time zones, and then this just becomes a methodology where people can do the research when it's right for them, because the board is open. Maybe in Carey's case, the students have some at school at different times. They could hop into that space and conduct their research at any time. So even international work, of course, there's some people, it's a great time to do the answers, but of course it wouldn't be the same for others in other countries and so And then finally, of course, whenever there's anything iterative, where you have to do something over and over again, we do big test on sleep patterns and test, how people reacting to different sleep methods, and every day they have to come back and talk about their sleep patterns. So it gives that platform to stretch research out. And then finally, I guess the other one is that we're seeing more work done is when it's you're looking for answers outside of a room, in any remote research cases where you want to talk about something that's happening in field. You can give examples of that. You can use a mobile app. You can show the grocery set or where you're shopping or how you're gardening, those types of things. So it really expands kind of the research perspective outside of a single space. With that, what you're seeing here again is a moderator's point of view. There's tabs across the top is where we kind of launch everything or manage everything. Participants' point of view, they're going to get a little bit different. They're going to get this home button and this discussion button. The home button from a participant's point of view is just going to include this panel. And in the first panel, we usually, like when someone comes to it, we usually give them the description on how to use the tool. Welcome to the group. Here's how you're going to navigate through this during the course of the process. And we just try to, this is where you can get some help. If you have any, you can call 1-800 or you can get, press the help button. And that just kind of sets the stage of, okay, well, I can understand how to get into it. The second tab that the participants will have is the discussion. This is where they go straight to the, now, in most cases, it'll begin with a welcome question, and that sets the stage for the research. So in Carey's case, he might talk a little bit about, okay, over the course of the next 2 or 3 days, I'm going to be asking some questions about drug use amongst teens. And it kind of settles the people into understanding what they're going to be asked throughout the rest of the study. Many of our groups are, one of the standards is like a 3-day group. And so often researchers will break it down by day. They don't want to overwhelm them with a whole bunch of questions. They'll say, here, here's your questions for the day. Usually about 20 to 30 minutes of activity a day. And that's kind of the sweet spot of both getting, good thorough answers and not asking too much of the participants. So that's what we see. That's what they'll normally get. In this case, we did everything in a day. The topic was about AI, and we asked some questions about that. Before I get into some of the question types and what you can ask, Carey touched base about this. We have a grouping question, and in this case, there's a lot of different groups. We just did this for the purpose of showing this off, but one of the things we encourage is you're able to pass on. In many cases, you have a demographic profile. Maybe you've collected that in a screener. You're able to move those profiles of demographic questions into the actual tool. And then you're able to actually view by those states. You're able to download by those states. You're able to ask questions by those states. So in Carey's case, he definitely wanted it broken down by the students and the parents. And so then he would have a tab where he could look at just the student answers or the parent answers. And then when he's setting up the questions, only ask this question to them, only ask them to them. So, again, a really easy way to kind of manage, the separation of some of those questions. I talked a little bit about question types. There are, every qualitative research professional that I know loves to have that option to do a little bit of quant within the group, just to get that, that quick poll amongst them. So there are some polling questions that you're able to do. You get some graphs on the fly. You can download them if you're doing any interim reporting. So just some quick ways to do that. There's single choice, multi-choice. You can see by participants, so you really get a good snapshot of what that participant's answers are specific to those questions. I talked a little bit about the profile information coming across. The tool gives you some capability to understand your participant in their answering, because I have that demographic profiling available to me. I can click by person, and it's going to bring up that person's specific questions throughout the study. So again, kind of in term, not necessarily on the reporting side of things, but I just want to kind of drill down and understand this participant as they're answering those questions. We can get advanced. We can get really, you know, there's lots of activities that can take place. I talked about some mobile activities, people going out, videos, and questions. You can set up your questions to reply by text. You can set them up to reply by video. Maybe you want to see their emotions or reactions to certain topics and everything. There are some activities. This is an market tool that we. Just a second here. This is a heat mapping tool, so participants can come in, they can mark up certain stimuli, talk to us a little bit about those advertisements that might be going out, give us another look at how both parents and the students would react to that type of marketing. And of course, just quick things like you can take a screenshot, download those reports right away. And the nice part about this is, as a moderator, you're getting this in real time. So you're able to see what's happening amongst those. And of course, they're, as an individual, they're just marking up one by one. You can set up your clients. They can be in their virtual back room. They are also watching this coming in real time. And they can talk amongst it about themselves. They can message you individually, privately, of course, the participants won't see it. And you're going to get a real sense of you know, how people are reacting to your work. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just gonna maybe briefly take you through the setup. So again, all the tabs are across the top. The real kind of place where your work is going to take place is in this moderator's guide. And Carey talked about setting your controls in this space. I can set up things in what we call interview mode. Interview mode is that feature that will only that person will see or be able to answer. So from their perspective, they're just speaking to that moderator back and forth. After that, we have uninfluenced mode. And in some cases, this is important because you want to set the stage on a topic, make sure you get everyone's initial reaction, but then perhaps talk about having some interaction about it. Like, how would people react after the fact and understanding it? And so you can use that mode. In that case, participant answer the question, and then after answering it, that's when all of the remainder of the answers or anyone else's answers becomes available and they can view it, go back and forth. And then there's an open mode. Open, it's just a free-form discussion. And it's really interesting because over the course of project that can change as an audience and gets to know each other, they understand each other. We did a really interesting study with end-of-life patients, and it was during COVID. And one of it was with the patients and caregivers. And at the start of it, there was one open area, and then the rest was interview mode. And so, you know, some of the real private questions we wanted to talk about, but then we had a space where these people could talk and discuss things with each other. What we found over the course of time is the group started to open up to each other. And more of what we would consider very sensitive topics started to open up because they felt they were in a safe space and they could speak to it. So depending on your study and over that space, that might be an option as well. And then some user management. In this case, all of the tools to add people, you can import, export, all of the tools to communicate with them. You can email everyone, you can talk to them, people that haven't logged in the last 24 hours, just some of the real tools to kind of manage your way along that process. And then I think kind of the most important part and what people want to see is what do we have for reporting, or, you know, how can I take this now from a data collection standpoint and build it into a reporting piece. And Carey talked about a few of those things, but along the way, there's some things like a completion report that shows us, you know, how people are doing in that process. Oh, okay, look, these people are making some And your recruiter or yourself, if you're involved, you can say, okay, well, you know what, Mike, looks like he hasn't logged in. You know, I'm going to just email Mike and just see if I can get him. That just popped up a little email over here for me. You know, hey Mike, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about getting started again. And so it gives you some tools to kind of stay on top of things and get the participation rates that you're looking for. But the big one is, of course, the transcripts. And in this space, we've provided a number of options. Carey talked about it, just a really simple way to choose the transcripts of the people you'd like. So all of those groups that I had, I could just download a transcript by one of those groups. So in his case, he used parents and students, and then he had 2 separate transcripts. You have a couple of different formats, Word, Excel, which give you some sorting options. You can include comments, observers, moderators' comments. Yeah, just a real single questions you can look at, and then all those can be downloaded and you can begin your reporting. Finally, through a new partnership with NVivo, you've got this little button here. This provides a downloaded in NVivo format that can be uploaded into that application. I can't get into that today, but the power of that tool from an analytics standpoint, the auto coding pieces and parts, it's just really opened up the breadth of kind of usefulness of the tool after the fact, and just really helping you as researchers get to those insights quicker. With that, I know we're approaching a little bit closer to the end of our time. I'm gonna pass this back to Crystal, and maybe we can go through some of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Dan. And thank you to you, Carey, as well. Really, really interesting stuff. And we do have a few questions to answer. So if anyone else in the audience does have some questions, please submit them now via that Q&A button on your Zoom panel there, and we'll make sure that we get them answered. So first question we have is really for anyone who wants to answer it. She says, one thing we've struggled with respect to boards is engagement. Do you have any strategies for encouraging quality participation?
Incentive. You know, the incentive was a big deal, and in this project we paid $200, so that it was well worth the while to engage on, you know, 30 questions for the parent and 30 questions for the student with it. Had no problem with engagement on it. And maybe that's the answer. Now, one thing our setup time took longer. It wasn't a matter of, oh, here's Hazel Smith, she's filled out the questionnaire, she's all good. I exchanged emails, 3 or 4, and made myself available for direct calls from parents. So there was a little bit of time, not so much in the engagement, but in the winnowing down to people who were gaining their trust and making sure they understood the project and then going for it. But a healthy incentive made the difference. The only other one was when we dropped it down to 13-year-olds, we had a little bit of an issue on engagement. And that just required, you know, 4 follow-ups rather than 1. And it was visually taken care of. So yeah, our administration time with kids, a little bit longer than normal, but nothing dramatic, nothing problematic. And I didn't see any issues in the quality of the data as a result of it.
Great, thanks. Anything to add to that, Dan?
Just a few things. So obviously, anything that's pertinent to the topic, in this case, you know, sometimes you don't have that choice. You know, this is what we're talking about, tax returns, and but sometimes that can be engaging in itself, finding people that are motivated to speak about that. In other cases, what I've heard back from moderators is to mix up some of the methodology in terms of question types. Don't just, you know, you can't be all text answers and pounding it out. Throw some different types in there. Get them to use their mobile device, go out, take a picture of their garden, you know, get them engaged at other levels than just the topics.
Great, thank you. Next question is from Liz, and it'll be for Carey. She says, just clarifying the study logistics and steps that you took. Did you recruit teens through the parents and then had the parents and teens complete a pre-discussion questionnaire that informed the questions and topics that were included in the discussion?
Yes, kind of. We started with parents, and our outreach was parents of teens in South Carolina between the ages of 13 and 18 who want to discuss, I forgot how it was worded. And then once they signed up, then we went into detail. And then we were looking for demographic questions, background, how many children in the household, a lot of things, what schools do they go to, private or whatever, things that would have an impact on the study. And because our client wanted diversity, that we had to cut. So, but we did allow, for instance, some parents had 3 teens, right? So we did allow the parent to choose the participant. We recommended the youngest. We always went to the youngest because a 13-year-old is on this topic is a lot different than a 17-year-old. And again, we didn't have to get consent for a 16, 17, or 18. So we went for the hardest, the youngest. And I wasn't sure. I really wasn't going to sure, but I did not, in the quality of the information, I did not see any or very little involvement or mentoring or coaching, from one to the other about it, because the answers are so vastly different. The language patterns were vastly different, and their awareness of things were vastly different. So we started with the parents, got the consent, involved them in the process, let them choose, but then isolated the 2 groups for the administration, different days, different times, and then back. We had to have a separate email for the teenager so that we could deliver the questionnaire directly to them. And then only one person do we have to go through a parent to do that. That was, again, a question we weren't sure about. But with most kids having some sort of cellular device, we even thought about the text, as a solution there to it. So it worked out. It worked out. It worked out fine.
Great, thank you. And also to do with the questionnaire, Abdul says, how do you plug the gap between the behavioral dimension and the conceptual dimensions intertwined in the questionnaire?
Wonderful question, because we were trying to demonstrate behavior or awareness, but the information was going to the conceptual, the creative, who were going to deal with it. And this is another great thing about the tool, we put in some links to articles rather than describe a situation. And this one was in the Washington Post about a kid who goes to college. His girlfriend rejects him. He's 18 years old, straight A student. His mother is a psychologist in Washington, D.C. He's down, he wants to feel good. Somebody says, try this pill. He's dead in 24 hours. Fentanyl laced, right. So it was also bought on social media. So rather than talk that through, we had the kids click on the link and read this article. So I wasn't telling them this. It was coming from, a real world situation. And then we asked a series of follow-up questions about, how does this story make you feel? What do you think Tim was thinking when this happened? Have you ever heard of situations like this? What would you do if you confronted it? So we got to the conceptual, by giving them a situation to react to with it. And the nice thing about it is that being able to provide stimulation like that through the board, so that they can see it and communicate. And again, we gave the parents the same thing. The parent answer on that versus the student answer on that were dramatic. And it was like, the experiential difference of what's important. How does a 15-year-old judge life? A lot different than their 45-year-old father or 35-year-old mother with it. So that really became the key. One pill and you're dead. I mean, how blunt is that? And that came from a kid. One pill and you're dead. Put it on a bulletin board. So those types of creative insights were very, very helpful to the creative folks.
Great, thanks, Carey. Next question is for Dan. Dan, can the platform also monitor responses to mod probes? Can it identify participants to nudge those who are not replying to probes?
Yeah, absolutely. When you reply to a participant, when they either log in or on their mobile device, they'll get a notification that they've been probed. But if they log back into the study as well, they'll see a case where the moderator has probed them. But they'll also, you can set it up so it sends them an email. And so those are kind of the three ways that we go back to and say, hey, the moderator has a little bit more for you specifically. And and usually that covers the three areas where we get them to respond.
Awesome. And last question, Carey, can you please comment on design considerations with respect to time commitment that you ask of the participants? Any comments on respondent fatigue or number of questions, probes, days of the study?
Didn't really see, I tell you what, they got interested in it. And again, structuring the questionnaire, and I mean, this comes from, writing polling, stuff. It's structuring the questionnaire to where it funnels the interest down is key to it. That's just one of those soft skills that you need to have. We didn't have any problem with it whatsoever. And the nice thing, and we had to do it occasionally, is tell me, to be able to go back and say, tell me more about that. Because the tool allows you to let them know that there's a follow-up question, about an answer that they gave with it. So you can be as involved as you want. We did not monitor, we monitored it after the fact, not in real time with it, but we didn't have any problem with getting things completed. And a lot of that had to do with telling the parent, this is going to be open for X number of hours, as well as that gets built into the information that comes out of itracks itself about when it's open and when it's closing. So there's a little bit of external pressure on get it done. And again, as with most good focus group participants, you don't get the incentive until the homework is completed with it. So it wasn't a problem. It was not a problem in this, but it's something going in we weren't sure about.
Awesome. Okay, well, we finished our questions just in time. It looks like we're approaching the top of the hour, but really, really, really fascinating stuff. So thanks so much, Carey, for sharing that work with us, and for Dan for kind of walking us through the platform there. Again, we will have the recording available. So for all of you who have registered for the webinar, you'll be receiving that by email later this week, and we will have it up on our website as well. So thanks again to Carey and Dan. Thanks to all of you who were able to join us today. And we hope to see you at the next one. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.
Enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Bye.